Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Liquid Antiquarian. We have a very special evening as we have a real-life historian joining us all the way from the Caribbean, which is tremendously exciting. Unfortunately, Dave, you are a little short of voice today.
A tad, yes. Suffering from a freezing cold hotel room in Edinburgh last week. But I'm alive and well. Well, not well, but alive.
Well, it's a good night for you to barely speak because Dr Geoffrey Ward will be joining us very shortly and giving us a presentation on rum and the Navy. So we are the Liquid Antiquarian. We chose that name because we are amateurs. We have this undying enthusiasm for the past and looking around for interesting stories to do with booze. But we have real history and from a professional tonight, and based around the subject of rum. Dave, what do you have in your glass?
I have a glass of Foursquare, finest in, I would say, in the world, certainly in Barbados. This is Equidem, which is there. Came out last year, 14-year-old port and something else. Bourbon Muscat, sorry. Bourbon Muscat. Yeah, sensational rum.
Yeah. And I have a 14-year-old from my old alma mater, Royal Mile Whiskies, exclusive they did. 14-year-old pot and column blend, ex-bourbon and ex-Madeira. I already know it's delicious. This is the second bottle I've opened. So that's absolutely wonderful. Now, Dave, I think what we're going to do tonight is, to save your voice, you're going to lurk in the background and I'll be the co-host along with Geoff and ask questions, but you're going to be keeping an eye on the comments.
Yep.
And at the end of the presentation, we'll those comments and questions, so please do keep them coming in. We'll ask them to Geoff at the end. And I think that can be about his presentation, about rum in general, life in Barbados. Geoff is very much a rum fan as well as someone who knows about the history of it. So there's a very good chance we'll be able to answer your question. Yep. But as ever, we raise a toast to our Patreons.
We'd not be here without you.
Yeah, the people who support this channel and very much make it possible. We're really, really grateful. Anything else, Dave, before we roll credits?
I think just sit back, enjoy. I've known Geoff for a couple of years. He's a fount of knowledge, a lovely, lovely man, and you will find out stuff today. Myths will be exploded, and new avenues of exploration will be opened. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this.
So am I. Let's roll those credits. Hi, Geoff.
Hey, Martha, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. And, well, good evening from here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon from Barbados. We're 4 hours behind.
Right, okay. Well, I've got the fire on. I'm sure that's not necessary where you are.
No, we have a fire in the sky that keeps us pretty toasty all year long.
Lucky you. Lucky you. So you're going to talk to us today about rum and the Navy. Correct a few misconceptions, I get that idea, which I'm very much looking forward to, because anything to do with the sea and boats seem to be swathed in superstition and mistruths and facts that everyone is sure are true because they've been repeated so many times. But before we kick off with your presentation, could you maybe just let us know a little bit about what you do and where your area of expertise is?
Sure. I am a Caribbean naval and maritime cultural historian. So my PhD was in, basically, I was investigating links between the Royal Navy and Barbados in the American Revolutionary War. Following that, I applied for, it was a competitive application, and I was awarded an R.L. Seale University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus post-doctoral fellowship in Barbados rum history. And what I'm doing with that, it's now coming to a close, is I'm looking at rum exports from Barbados between 1775, when they started to dip, to 1820, which is a couple of years after the end of the Napoleonic Wars. So I've been able and very lucky to blend the naval side and the maritime side with the rum side. And when Black Top Day comes around, I tend to get the hairs on my back up a little bit. So I'm very happy that you have me on. Now, the history of rum and the Royal Navy is fascinating in and of itself. It doesn't really need any amplification, you know.
Yeah, there's a rich history there. It's just clarifying what happened when and why, and that's what I'm looking forward to hear. You mentioned R.L. Seale, but is that linked to Richard Seale and the Foursquare business?
Yes, what it is R.L. Seale wanted to fund some postdoctoral fellowships. There are three of us looking at three very specific areas in Barbados rum history. But what they did was they worked with the university. So they removed them, they provided the funds, removed themselves from the scholarship so we could do independent work through the university. And we're very, very fortunate and thankful that they've done it, because it has allowed us to uncover some really interesting things.
Yeah, and that's great that comes from the industry side that is prepared to look in depth and use professionals to look in depth at history, which happens all too rarely, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay, the work stuff aside, you're also a founding member of the Barbados Rum Club. So I imagine, even though the sun's not yet over the yard arm technically at 3 o'clock, you might have something in your glass?
Absolutely, it went over at 12 for me. So I do. I'm on Foursquare's Fidelitas. It is a 20-year-old ex-bourbon, ex-marsala at 55%. And I think it's absolutely lovely. It's rich, complex, a bit more pot still than you're used to on the back end of a Foursquare. And it's an absolutely delicious sipper that you think about and you enjoy.
Yeah, that's a impressive bottle for anyone who knows the rum world. That's really, really impressive. Super. I should have mentioned actually what I was drinking. At some point, I haven't done the decanting yet, but I'm also going to drink from my grandfather's pewter hip flask that I can only assume he had in his pocket when he was on Royal Navy ships. So,
amazing.
I mentioned that because there's my aunties might be watching and they'll be pleased.
Nice. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolute pleasure. No, thank you so much for coming and yeah, sharing your wisdom, and we've got some great slides prepped. I've really enjoyed putting them together for you, and yeah, if you're ready to crack on, I'm excited.
All right, let's do it. So, good evening, everybody. What I'd like to do here is just go through the overview for tonight. I'm going to do a brief timeline on Navy rums. I'm not a names and dates historian, but we do need to cover a few important dates. We then go through some truths about proofs. Proof has been something that I've been very interested in for quite some time. What did the naval commanders think about rum? We know that sailors enjoy drinking rum, but what did the commanders and the Admiralty Board think about it? We're going to have a few anecdotes on the rum, a few small stories here and there, and then we'll tackle this persistent myth of gunpowder proof. So, if we get into it, what I'd like to show you here first is an excerpt from an 1831 Admiralty manual. And even in 1831, this is instructions to the purser or pusser who looked after the the goods on board the ship, both wines, spirits, beer, but also the food, the slop clothing, etc. And it says he is to notice that the wines and spirits are never to be issued in home ports, while beer is supplied for the use of ship, nor at sea till it be all expended. And what we're really getting at here is that rum and spirits in general, until a date which I'll get to very shortly, were substitutes for beer, which had been served on board English, later British Navy vessels since Tudor times. People think of rum in the 18th century, so the 1700s, as a spirit that was served as a ration on board ships. That is absolutely not the case. It all depended on where you were in the world. If you were in the Caribbean, you got rum because rum was available. If you were in the home ports in the UK, you got beer because beer was available. If you're in the Mediterranean, and we'll get to this later, you got brandy because it was available. If you're in India, you got arak. So it all depended where you were in the world to what you got. But the actual ration was beer, and the spirits were substitutes. So we have a couple dates here. And when I'm doing this on a talk, I normally ask people, which do they think? What date do they think rum became the official drink of the Royal Navy? I'll lead it off here. It's none of these dates.
I was scrolling through trying to think from my knowledge which one it might have been. So I'm reassured that none of them are the right answer.
It was a bit of a trick one, but again, we have to do these names and dates. So 1655 is the first primary source document showing that rum was issued to sailors in the English Navy as a replacement for beer. This was in Jamaica with Penn and Venables. They had they attacked Jamaica successfully after an abortive attempt in the Spanish West Indies. And rum was issued at 1 pint and 1 pound of sugar per man per day. An insane amount of rum.
And an enormous amount of sugar as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the sugar would have been mixed with their oats and with their food to make it more palatable rather than dosing the rum from all accounts. Now, 1688 is the first official naval rum contract with a London merchant and Samuel Pepys. 1731 is the first time that rum is mentioned in the Admiralty instructions that were issued to captains of naval vessels. If you notice there, it's a substitute to beer and served at half a pint per day. So we've dropped in a space of 80 years by 50%. 1 pint to a half a pint, and there's a part in the middle that we will get to as well with that.
If I could just ask a question, it might be a little
Absolutely.
obvious. So as a substitute to beer, that's presumably because of the durability of spirit, and I suppose to a certain degree fortified wine as well.
Well, fortified wine was used as an alternative as well. Madeira wine we'll get to was used quite a lot. But beer lasted 6 to 8 weeks in a cask, and that was it.
Yeah, and it's bulkier as well.
Absolutely, because they got a gallon of beer per person.
So longer time away from shore, it makes absolute sense to use a more concentrate spirit, and also one, or more concentrate alcohol, but also one that would take up less space.
Absolutely, but they got that alcohol when they went to the various stations for most of the time. It was not. Rum was not issued in England for naval ships coming to the Caribbean. They were issued beer, and then they got rum when they got to the Caribbean.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we're on the last set of dates there, right? Yes. Now, 1740 is when you have the famous grog order issued by Admiral Vernon. He was nicknamed Old Grogram because of the coat he always wore. And then it turned into grog. I've never understood why they've said rum issued at a half pint with a quart of water. They're the same thing. They're mixing it 50%. Split into 2 rations. They got one at midday and one at dinner. And this, when people start to quibble about the strength of Navy spirits, I tend to shake my head a little bit, because all of a sudden, well, they're still diluting it by 50% before they drink it, and they get it twice a day.
Mhm.
Now, 1833 is when rum replaces the beer ration in Britain. Overseas rations, when you are in the Mediterranean or in the Far East, they remained. But rum did replace the beer ration in Britain in 1833, and rum only became the official fleet-wide ration of the Royal Navy in 1844. So that's the first real conception that I'd like to tackle, is that people think that rum was fleet-wide by 1731, and it really was not. It was all dependent on your geographical location. There were some small amounts of rum. In the American War, they had 100,000 gallons stored in the UK, which was equivalent, I think it's 10,000 sailors for a month. But they didn't store rum in any serious quantity, even into the Napoleonic Wars. It was only after the Napoleonic Wars that rum came to the UK in any quantity specifically for the Royal Navy. Right?
So what I certainly came to this presentation, or in the preparation to it, with the kind of impression that rum had always been there everywhere in the British Navy. I guess that's one of the points you're trying to disprove, because you hear it and are aware that's kind of how people generally think of it. Why do you think it has persisted and stuck as that impression? Is it a timing thing that after 1833, then there's a lot of writing and it just goes into kind of lore and myth of how people think about the Navy?
No, I think rum is a very small part of a very large logistical chain that is unbelievably complex. For the academics among you, read David Surratt's Shipping in the American Revolution, or Roger Morris's Ascendancy, the Foundations of Sea Power. And it deals with the whole logistical chain of how does the English, well, we're talking British government at this time, supply soldiers and sailors around the world. Because it's all well and good to have a big army, but if you cannot feed people and keep them in reasonably good health, you can't project power. Mm-hmm. We will get to the Admiralty instructions, and it's a part that I think is very important for the misconceptions, especially with the timelines. But it essentially boils down to a lack of context. Rum does not stand alone. It is a relatively small part of a very large puzzle. And you need to have exposure to that very large puzzle to understand rum's place in it. Mm-hmm. So if that makes sense.
It does. Dave's put a cryptic little question in the private chat, which is export porter concentrate ? I can guess what that means, but anything to you, Geoff?
No. You want to jump on and let me know, Dave?
Yeah, go on, Dave.
Hi guys. No, it was just when you were talking about beer and the episode that we did a while back about porter, and the love of the Caribbean for porter. And when you were thinking about beer not lasting, one reason that porter became popular in the Caribbean was because it was of higher strength and therefore would last the sea journey more. And then the production of actually porter concentrate, which would then actually continue or exacerbate that. So no, I was just wondering if that was.
Yeah, but I mean, it again boils down to cost. When you got to the Caribbean, rum, especially the new rum the Navy bought, was cheap as chips, and you didn't have to transport it. You didn't have to stock it and store it. So there's an economic side of it as well that is very, very important to the Navy and the bean counters in the Navy, because it's an unbelievably expensive branch of service. It's the highest technology. It's equivalent to the Air Forces today. with the ultra high net worth equipment was the Navy in the time.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, do you want another rest?
Yeah, thank you.
You can go back, but you can go back below decks.
Right. So when people talk about the 1731, I always say, well, if you need to pick a starting point for when rum was officially introduced to the Royal Navy, well, it's here. It's 1688 was the official introduction. It was used before, but this is the first approval of a contract to supply rum from the British government to a London merchant named Mr. Waterhouse. And in it's a bit of a segue here, because Samuel Pepys is talking specifically about taking care of the good and ill effects of this proof. When he talks about proof, we'll get to that, with respect to the good husbandry thereof, as the health and satisfaction of our seamen be carefully be inquired into by you, as reported to us in a year or two, or sooner if you find it necessary. So Samuel Pepys is saying, yes, we can officially use rum, but we need to be very careful and understand that it's not going to hurt the sailors overmuch by imbibing. I'll show you here the other part to that. This is from the actual contract. And you're looking here at 3/4 of a pint of rum. Remember, in 1655, it was a pint. In 1731, it was a half a pint. Here it's 3/4 of a pint with a 1/4 pound of sugar instead of a pound of sugar. So they're dropping things. Now, again, we're getting into economics here. And he's talking, they don't mention proof as in strength. They just say with good and wholesome proof rum, fit for his majesty's subjects. Okay? This is proof as a concept. We can see this slightly later down the road here. This is a piece of a contract in Barbados to provide Dutch prisoners of war with food and rum. Yes, prisoners were provided with rum in the American Revolution in 1781. And here they're talking about rum that is what is called Jamaica proof. This is common language used in legal documents at this time. And we're talking about Jamaica proof here. It's a thing that McCusker, and he wrote 2 mighty tomes that, unless you're really interested in the subject, are a completely perfect cure for insomnia. But within these tomes, he wrote that Jamaica was considered the strongest with their double distillation. Then Antigua, Grenada, St. Vincent, and Barbados was at the bottom. Barbados used to do a lot of single distillation rum, which is why the Navy was very fond of it, because it was cheaper. So the prisoners actually got better rum, or it was stipulated that they got better rum than the Royal Navy in the American War, right? But we have this concept of proof, and this carries on. This is down into 1808. This is an advertisement in the local newspaper, the Mercurian Gazette. 200 puncheons. A puncheon in that time, think of 2 barrels. You're looking at around 160 to 170 gallons of good quality with a bubble-proof 25 puncheons, 8 hoops each. Now, I was very, very confused about this when I saw bubble 25. I'd never seen it before. So I went to one of the best spirits historians that I know, who's Richard Seale. And I asked Richard if he had ever heard about it. And the two of us just started to dig. And these are philosophical bubbles, basically little blown bubbles. And we were trying to figure the proof, and we finally did in an 1830s document. 26 bubble, which is 1 stronger than the 25, roughly equates to 5% underproof by the Sykes hydrometer. So you're talking mid 50s, 55, 57% roughly. There's no definitive percentage because all the bubbles were individually blown. There were a couple of different bubbles. There are different hydrometers. You had twaddle. You had a whole bunch of different people. There was no real regulation until the Sykes hydrometer was used as the standard hydrometer. Even though it was used from 1803, it took another 30 odd years to become the standard hydrometer. And it's only then that we can really start looking at proof in ABV. Before that, it's very suggestive, and you just have a range. You can't highlight an exact proof historically.
Well, they struggle to measure it themselves, and I've seen a set of these philosophical bubbles. So just to explain, they kind of come in a kit in a lovely wooden box like that, and then on the inside, it almost looks like a child's game or something, or that you might play. And then these beautiful glass blown spheres of different sizes. So they drop them in the liquid, and they either sink or float depending on the density or strength of the alcohol. So the different size gives you some indication of the strength of the liquid. It's on my wish list of beautiful old objects that I'd like to buy, but they're a bit more expensive than the Sykes hydrometer. But I'm on the lookout. One of these days I'll pick a set up.
I got a set of modern philosophical bubbles. There's a gent, I can let you know later on. You can put it in the comments if you want. There's a gent that makes them in the US, and it's a set of 5 philosophicals. They're not the antiques, but they are fun to play with. I have a set here. I just have them packed away. I couldn't find them in time for today, but they are good fun to play with.
I'm holding out for the dusty old set. Yeah, no, I'm afraid I am.
I know.
If you don't mind, I just want to go back one step just to provide a bit of context. Well, some people might have wondered, well, hang on, Samuel Pepys, I've heard of him. Why is he suddenly popping up? Because he's famous as a diarist and a politician who rose out of the middle classes, because he was chief secretary of the Admiralty, so a really important administrator of a hugely costly part of the state. So, and he was a very talented administrator, known to be as such. So he held a really important role, but he becomes more famous for his diaries, which are full of all sorts of debauchery as well.
I think the word is.
Yeah. It's I mean, he would be, by today's values, he would be counted as not just an adulterer, but an abuser, and guilty of sexual harassment and assault. But they're really important record of the time, and he describes much of middle class life as well as touching government and a little bit of aristocracy. So anyway, that's why Samuel Pepys popped up. He's an extremely important figure in the history of the Navy. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%.
Sorry for the interruption. Do carry on.
No. Anytime, please jump in. That's what this evening's about. I don't normally get to work in this format, and I really enjoy it.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So we're moving on here, and I had spoken a little bit earlier about the geographical location of the sailors and what they got to drink. This is from an 1806, essentially blue paper. It's a book that's written, you can find it on Google Books, on the Caribbean. And what they're saying here, they're talking about rum and the British and the American markets. And they're saying that rum is indispensable for the West India planters. It says, under the comparative distaste and discouragement of rum, and this article in British consumption. But then they make a really interesting point. And they say that distaste doesn't come from people not liking rum. It comes from people not drinking a lot of rum. And when they're talking about people, they're talking about the Army and the Navy, and sailors and soldiers leaving, coming home. In 1805, the British Admiralty, by contract, purchased 625,100 gallons of brandy. and only 250,000 gallons of rum. I chose this slide because it really highlights just how topical it was, where you were, and what you were given where you were, right? So we're gonna switch gears a little bit here now, and we're gonna go into what did the commanders think about rum, and we'll take one or two small side steps and come back to it, and then move on. So Vice Admiral Pye, we're at the end, just after the 7 Years' War, sorry, Commander-in-Chief of His Majesty's ships in the Leeward Islands, complaining of the newness and bad quality of rum supplied by contractors to His Majesty's ships. Now, there's quite a lot to unpack there. So, for context, in the 1740s, the Caribbean was split. Before 1745, the Caribbean was known as the Jamaica Station. So when you talk about rum and Jamaica, you're not physically just talking about Jamaica. You're talking about, in regard to the Royal Navy, what you're talking about is the command and control in Jamaica that controlled the entire Caribbean. With the War of Austrian Succession, the Caribbean, they realized that Jamaica cannot effectively control the entire region, and it's split into two commands. You have the Jamaica Station, which is the Leeward Station, the one furthest downwind, and you have the Leeward Island Station, which is the one furthest to windward. I don't know how they came up with it, but that's the name they gave it. So we have to deal with it and confuse people for the next time in memoriam, because they called it a strange name. But the Leeward Island Station are the small islands to the windward in the chain. And that there were three main islands when you talk about the Leeward Island Station. Barbados was the arrival point from Europe, the intelligence center, what we would call a forward operating base today. You had St. Lucia during the war times. It was captured quite often, where the battle fleet would stay in what is now Rodney Bay. And they could have one or two picket ships looking in to Fort-de-France in Martinique, and they could know exactly when everyone came out. And then you had Antigua that had English Harbor, which everybody now knows as Nelson's Dockyard. So you had these three main points. The second piece to unpack in this that's really important is when they talk about contractors. The Navy, although there was a commissary set up in the 7 Years' War, which is 1756 to 1765, the reality of the situation is that they used naval contractors. And those naval contractors would provide the food, rum, bedding, etc. for the Navy at generally 4% profit. When you talk about Harewood House, the Harewoods made a massive money victualling and being the naval contractors and the victualling contractors in the Caribbean in the 1740s. And they say it's one of the most lucrative things that family did. The problem here comes when you have a private organization that is trying to provide food, spirits, clothing, etc., for a very volatile situation. You could have no naval ships, and then a fleet shows up with 10,000 people, and you don't have the supplies, because it takes 6 months to order the supplies, get them in, all of that. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Can you still see me?
Yeah. Still seeing you fine. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, well, so it's a huge prize. It's a huge contract, but
Yes.
There's difficulties in supplying it. And 4% sounds like a low margin, but I don't know what margin would be difficult in those days.
It is these days, but remember, they didn't have the income tax, which was brought in the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. It was very, very low tax as well, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not talking 4% profit, but you're almost talking 4% profit. Yeah. And then you had all the kickbacks and underhand dealings and everything like that. So
I'm sure
what would happen is, from time to time, if a large fleet came in, they could have issues supplying things, and they would go for really cheap, poor rum, or poor food. The other thing, and it's in a different talk I give, and it's a little bit later in the French Revolutionary Wars, but there was a major scandal in Barbados where they took rum that was supposed to be aged. They put some oak chips in it to give it a darker color, and they put a little bit of sugar in it, and they called it old rum because it was smoother, and sold new rum as old rum. They were caught out, and there was a massive investigation, and it was a serious confusion, right? So these are all old tricks. These are not new tricks that have been done for centuries.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, adulteration is absolutely a topic we want to get onto because it keeps coming up and it's so fascinating.
Absolutely.
The rum given to the Dutch prisoners of war, and then another couple of slides you mentioned, is this just because of quality for the people working on board, and so they are happy and sustained? Or is there a concern as well that drinking very young spirit has a different effect, and they have any concern about that? Because certainly once you get into this era, there is that perception when it comes to the spirit distilled in Scotland and elsewhere that drinking new spirit can result in deterioration of morals and violent behavior and things like that. Is that a concern of theirs as well?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a pretty good segue, because we're at that point where, that's exactly where we are.
Perfect.
So what we're talking about here is both the consumption of alcohol and the quantity of alcohol. And this is from the American War, that Colonel Pitcairn is sleeping in the barracks with a battalion of his Marines to help wean them off of rum in Boston. He wrote, "I would not have your lordship think that we are worse than the other battalions here. The rum is so cheap, and it debauches both Navy and Army and kills many of them. Depend on it, my lord, it will destroy more of us than the Yankees will."
Right.
To put this into perspective, this is a full colonel when the differentiation in rank was much greater then than it is today. Sleeping in the barracks with his Marines to keep them from drinking rum. We know alcoholism is very, very prevalent. Again, in that same war, this is Admiral Barrington, probably one of the best admirals in the Caribbean during the American War. I am under no apprehensions about rum. So many people are ready and willing to supply that it will flow in upon us like a tide. And that like a tide, that it's inexorable, is I find really fascinating. Barrington actually, and his army counterpart, Major General Vaughan, they actually put an embargo on rum and captured quite a lot that people were trying to sneak in. A little later on here, again, these are some of the anecdotes. 50 Frenchmen died from rum that the British had left in Quiberon Bay. Now, some of this is going to be badly made rum, and a lot of this is that they literally just drank themselves to death. There was no one holding them back, and they drank themselves to death. So we can see that rum, the consumption is a problem. And the next slide will show you, this is from a diary of Anthony Gardner during the Napoleonic Wars. Midshipman, dead, passionately fond of grog, which made him ungrateful in return by taking him out of this world before it was agreeable. To be named Ramcat, Bat, and Ramon the Butcher in that day and age, he must have been something else.
Yeah, four nicknames. Wow,
All of them
not
unpleasant. They speak to how unpleasant and how debaucherous Henry was.
Yeah, it doesn't suggest he was reading novels and playing chess on the long voyages, does it?
Absolutely not. Andrew Duff, midshipman, dead, a drunken Hun. You know, the surgeon, uncertain, mad from drink. Mackey, dead, a commander, went around the world on a voyage, came home safe, drank grog, and died.
Wow.
He can survive around the world, but he can't survive around.
And there's a
Pauline,
few there's a few ranks in there as well, a lieutenant and a captain.
this is it. This is what I'm trying to show you, is that these are not, the alcoholism and the overuse was not limited to the lower decks. There were officers that were raging alcoholics. In this, I don't normally use it, but in this this diary, Gardner's diary, they talk about a prank they played on the purser who they didn't like on a ship, where when they killed one of the cows on board and they carried live cattle on board to have fresh beef from time to time, that they all the officers got drunk and they got the cow's skin and head and dressed somebody up in it in the orlop. And when the purser went down, they went to scare him, and he came out like a scalded cat, you know, and everybody's rolling around thinking this is hilarious, dead drunk when they should be driving the ship. These guys, they were not easy, you know, they really were not easy. And this wonderful cartoon that you put into the slide, you know, it's true. I mean, people are saying people did have serious medical complications from the amount of rum that they drank, even though people tried to limit it. You can't limit these things. Everybody's trading through gun ports. And it gives a good idea of what people thought of naval surgeons at the time. The naval surgeons were failed surgeons. They were the lowest of the low. And until Gilbert Blaine, who was in the Caribbean, that's an aside, I could talk forever about Gilbert Blaine. Until Blaine actually worked with as an administrator to quantify the cure for scurvy, which was done here in Carlisle Bay in Barbados in 1780. He was the first naval surgeon that was given position as a baronet, that was raised to the nobility. Other than that, surgeons were considered the drunks, the barbers, the physicians that couldn't make it in the real world. They went on board a ship and they plied their trade. Right? And
even the reputation of other physicians as well was not the same as we would think of as doctors now.
Absolutely.
It was still had that element of quackery about it, or mistrust that it was quackery. Could you, just because I want to check I understood this correctly, what exactly is going in here? Because I seem to interpret that there was some attempt to give some kind of enema. Is that right?
Yes, the Chester pipe. That's absolutely right. He's trying to give him a cure for what they called rum blossom fever, you know, and he's saying you can batter my skull, but I'll be damned if you come at me with that shyster pipe, giving him an enema. So what the physicians of the time, and Gilbert Blaine wrote this really good piece, again, Google Books, get it for free, download it, called Observations on the Health of Seamen. And he strongly disagreed with rum. He thought that new rum was noxious and old rum was better, but he didn't know why. It was pure conjecture. And he essentially says, we don't know why old rum is better. The Army specified rum at least 1 year old. The Navy said, send it fresh, send it new rum, we don't care. And that's to do with funds and economics as well. But there was this notion, and then there was an Army surgeon in Jamaica who was looking at it. Now, at this time, people were thinking lead poisoning quite a lot. And my investigations have discovered it wasn't from the actual distillation of the spirit. Talking with some biologists and chemists and people who have actually dug up bones in English Harbor and taken them to Canada, used mass spectrometers on them to figure out what's going on. The closest we can pin it down to is that the lead poisoning came from punch in pewter bowls. The punch bowls were made out of pewter, which had a lot of lead in them. And you have a very strong punch. That's modern though, so you should be okay. But the pewter bowls had quite a lot of lead in them, and you had very strong spirit sitting for quite a long time. A pewter tankard, they're drinking that rum so fast it's not going to make a difference. But the rum that's left to sit and the punch that's left to sit, that's That's the best guess on where most of the lead poisoning came from. Right?
Interesting.
I couldn't help but put this in. Bumbo, this is Roger at random. It's a work of fiction, but written by Peter Smollett, who was a naval surgeon in the 1740s. So a lot of these footnotes are actual fact, and you have to search through them. But he's saying that Bumbo is a liqueur composed of rum, sugar, water, and nutmeg. So, excuse me, Bumbo doesn't stray far from its origins right now as a liqueur full of rum and full of sugar and spices. It was not considered a rum then, and I dare not consider it a rum now.
No.
But this is Bumbo was a historical drink, and it was a liqueur served in wardrooms in the ships.
Amazing. Did they just get lucky? I mean, when they designed that drink?
Well, nutmeg was available particularly in Grenada in the Caribbean, and it was something that's kept very well until you shave it and grate it. Sugar was readily available, rum was readily available, and water was reasonably readily available. So you're pretty good. You're set. You're good to go.
No, I meant the modern drink in terms of.
I don't know. I tried it once many years ago, and I can't say that I've revisited it or that I have any urge to revisit it. That's the truth.
No, let's move on from that. Not a
rum. So we're talking here. This is Admiral Rodney, and Gilbert Blaine was his surgeon general in his fleet. And Rodney was saying, rum or brandy in cold weather is really good, and that however detrimental spirits may be in the torrid zones, the warmer zones, they're absolutely necessary in the frigid. Without a daily use of spirits, the fishery of Newfoundland could not be carried on, which are found by long experience to be the only method of preserving the health of men employed on that most important fishery. Now, again, we'll just tuck into a little thing here. Why he's talking about a fishery? People say, well, why is Admiral talking about a fishery? The fisheries, sailors have to be trained. They're very skilled. Flogging was a lesser sentence brought in because most of these sentences would have been death or transportation. And flogging was a system of lesser punishment brought in that actually recognized the value of seamen. And they were fed around 4,000 calories a day, because it was recognized that they needed a lot of food and a lot of energy to do their jobs. Wow. So not as many people as is made out in popular culture were pressed. Being a sailor in the Royal Navy was an unbelievably hard life, but the truth is that you got fed reasonably well. You got meat 5 times a week. You didn't get meat 5 times a week normally, But these fisheries, and why there was always this fight around fisheries, was that the fisheries are where seamen learn their trade as young apprentices. And then when the Navy expanded, those seamen were used by the Navy, turned into sailors to do their fighting. So it was an unofficial reserve, manpower reserve for the Royal Navy. And that's why there were fights and serious struggles over the fisheries, particularly Newfoundland, Newcastle, and all these different places. So
to ensure recruitment later on, because they already knew how to handle the boat, they were used to life at sea, or on the sea.
To ensure manpower, absolutely.
Interesting, gosh.
Absolutely. So Rodney here, this is 1781 again. The season is sickly. And if it's possible to supply ships with wine in this climate, thousands of lives may be saved, and the rum useful to our seamen in the moist and cold channel. I just wanted to bring that up before coming to the next one. And this is a bit of a long slide, and to everybody watching, you might just have to have a read on it while I chat about it. The Navy, at its core, was a mercenary enterprise. Sailors, from admirals to the lowest sailor, were given prize money for ships they captured, goods they captured. If they sank a ship, they were given head money for the amount of people that were on it. Great fortunes could be won when you're serving. Oh, yes, absolutely. Cod Wars is a great book. And there's just a book called Cod, which is really, really good as well.
That's great.
Now, what Rodney did here, I was talking about the financial incentives. The flip side of this is that admirals had a very decentralized command structure, so they were given immense leeway. But that leeway was tempered by fiscal responsibility. And if admirals committed the British government to financial plans or contracts that the government in London thought were not right, the admiral was docked the amount of money the bean counters in London thought appropriate out of their prize money before they got paid. So what Rodney is saying here, excuse me, is that he wanted the wine. We saw that earlier. But he went so far as to authorize the purchase of over 83,000 gallons of Madeira for his sailors. And this is the letter he is writing, that he's saying that I flatter myself their lordships will approve of it. And he's saying that, basically saying, I hope I made the right decision, you'll approve it, and I don't get charged for every single gallon of this wine.
But he's not sure.
No, he's not sure. He has no idea, but he needs a fighting force. And he's that concerned about rum that he's willing to take that gamble financially, because he knows that if he can't fight, he won't win accolades, he won't win his sureties, he won't advance. He'll be fired and left in ignominy, you know.
Can you just explain for a moment, because I have a little bit of knowledge on this, because I happened to read the diaries of William Hoste, who sailed with Nelson, and my mum, well, my family believes they were descended from William Hoste. And in that, I read the diaries with my mum, and I was struck by this concept of prize money from the perspective of someone who doesn't understand naval history, and I imagine there are a few people here who don't. Because so when they capture an enemy ship, it's not handed over to the state in its entirety, and there is bounty, there's booty for the ship that capture them. That's right,
yes,
isn't it?
So essentially the state values, well, first off, it was very rare to actually sink a ship. These wooden ships were very, very durable. And most of these sinkings weren't from fighting, they were from storms. The Navy, because they're so expensive, they're worth repairing, even if they're pretty badly beat up. And what you're going to do is the Navy will value the ship based on the size of the ship, the condition, the number of guns, the stores on board that they don't have to buy. And they will assign a value to that ship. And then that value will be distributed in proportion. You have your admirals, your captains, your officers, and your other ranks. And the proportions differ if you're on independent crews without an admiral or if you're under an admiral. Right? This is again promoting this very aggressive mercantilist streak that the British have. Instead of having frigates sitting down doing nothing, we're going to send our frigates out commerce raiding, and we're going to send them out to trade, to interdict trade, because we'll get a portion of the value of any goods they capture. So it fosters this extremely aggressive spirit in the Royal Navy.
Well, my mum interrupted me when we were reading the book, and she said this is just piracy with better uniforms. That was her comment.
It's more privateering, you know. So
yeah, okay, fine.
A little bit more structured than privateers as well, who were pirates with a letter saying we can do this. But yes, it was mercenary. There's no getting around it. And that's what, if you were like Admiral Byng, who probably was shot unjustly, but if you showed cowardice, they would shoot you even if you were an admiral. If you were aggressive, even if you lost, they would actually reward you for being aggressive. Once your people fought well, once they held everything up, you would get a new ship. You would get a chance to go. They say, well, you proved yourself. If it was against horrible odds, you were aggressive, you were tenacious, you're who we want, we'll give you another vessel.
And as I understand it, some people did very well out of that system as well, rising up through class to be able to buy extensive lands back home and really make a career and significant wealth behind that career also.
Absolutely. There's a long list. I mean, we could spend all evening on that. But it was a very lucrative venture if you were an officer and you made it to captain. Once you made the captain's list, you were promoted as people above you. You know, there's that Navy toast, a war and sickly season, because you were promoted up the list, and you could make admiral if everybody above you died. Once you were a captain, you were on a trajectory that was pretty hard to stop. Even if you were a yellow admiral, which meant you were made an admiral, you got the financial benefits, but you didn't get a fleet. You weren't employed. You were still made an admiral. It was an interesting system. You know, it was geared towards aggressive, tenacious behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to just show you here. I'm a little bit conscious. I know we're going to be running on. We got like maybe a third left. I really wanted to do some anecdotes here and bring it back. Again, this is Peter Simple by Frederick Marriott, who was an officer in the Napoleonic era. And he's talking about Midshipman Simple, who is, I would say, more innocent than simple. And he's in charge of a bunch of sailors coming into Carlisle Bay to Beccles Spring to fill water in casks from the spring there that was an artisanal spring and one of the main features in Barbados. And there are these coconuts being sold by the enslaved. And he selected one and they had an objection. And they said, no, you need this one. This is good milk. And he drank from it, found it refreshing, but all of his sailors got rolling drunk. And he couldn't understand what was going on. He got them back out to the boat, and the captain had a good laugh at him. Excuse me. And he said that it's called sucking the monkey. All the other ones that they didn't want to give you were full of rum, and yours was full of coconut water. And that's how they sold the rum to the sailors, right? And got them absolutely sloshed, right? Couldn't figure out how it was done. So we read this, excuse me, as a fiction, and we say, okay. But then we look at a map that I've figured out is around circa 1810. This is one small part of it. You have Beccles Spring there, and you have Negroes' houses and rum shops. And this is the first time I've ever seen a rum shop described as a rum shop historically. Is on a British naval map next to Beccles Spring, doing exactly what they talked about in Mr. Midshipman Simple.
And I maybe missed it, but when is this from?
It's circa 1810.
Okay.
Yeah, circa 1810. The map doesn't have a date on it, but we were able to date it. They have some buildings at the garrison, and we can date it by when certain buildings were built and when certain buildings had yet to be constructed. Right? But so that's what we're looking at is you can read these fictions, but the fictions oftentimes are based in truth. And I find that is one of my favorite anecdotes. Again, I've never seen, or I haven't seen any previous where, if anybody has, please show me where they actually show rum shops. Right? Now, we're segueing here into, this is a lot of the perceptions and misconceptions that we're getting into gunpowder proof. And this whole foolish notion of testing rum with gunpowder on board ships. And a bunch of malarkey. That's all I can say. The Admiralty Instructions of 1790. But the keeping as well as issuing of said liquors being liable to be a dangerous accident if proper care not be taken. For prevention such accidents, the storerooms for holding said liquors are to be fitted in the following manner. They go on to describe a whole bunch of things, basically as those for the powder rooms, the magazines. Proper sentinels are to be placed to prevent candles being brought near the hatches. That's how they spell hatches. That's not how I spell hatches. To the spirit store while they are open, or near the liquor while it is serving, or starting it on the deck. That means taking the barrels out of the hold onto the deck. Neither of which is ever to be done but by daylight. You cannot do it at night. You cannot bring fire or flame close to these things. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember when we talked about, I said earlier, about Admiralty Instructions, the 1731, but things had been done before, and how it took time for certain practices to be included in Admiralty Instructions. A lot of people take the 1731 Admiralty Instructions as when rum was first issued instead of 1688, because it's the first time it appears in Admiralty Instructions. That 1790 book is the first time they talk about the use, the proper storing and serving of spirits on board a ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at a model of HMS Bellona. This is one of my favorite models, and every time I go to Greenwich, I just go in the model room and gaze at this thing. It's absolutely fascinating. That's a Bellona class. It's one of the very first 74-gun ships of the line. Or standard ships, the Dublin class. Ordered by the Admiralty in 1757, design completed in 1758, and launched in 1760. Okay?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The 1790 instructions are the first time it talks about the proper handling. Pardon these things here. What we're looking at is the yellow are the magazines. The green is where the rum was stored. If you look, the hatch number 23 there is right under the stairs next to where all of the professional non-commissioned officers, the bosun, the purser, everybody lives on board the ship. Number 3 on the top one, you can see it just to the right-hand side of the first yellow marking. That's where all the dry salted fish is kept, to keep the most inert material available between the spirit store or the bear store that they knew would have spirits in it and the aft magazine. They were practicing this in the 1750s, but it was only codified in the 1790 book. And this is where this problem with context comes in. What I'll do is just show you here. This is when I came up in October to speak at Rum Fest. If you look by the wings and limbs tub with the fake appendage in it, that hatch just below it is the hatch to the rum store, and there are the cabins surrounding it, where the professional officers lived.
Mm-hmm.
On the same trip, I'll just run through these here a little bit quickly. On the same trip, I went to see Trincomalee, and it's my favorite naval museum in Britain. No offense to HMS Victory, but this beats it hands down. It's a stunning thing. And it's hard to point out on the screen. Can you see my pointer or no?
No, I'm afraid not.
So down to the bottom left, you'll see a magazine at the back, then a light set of what looks like bags. That's the saltfish. Immediately to the right of that is the spirit store, which is directly under the stairs by the same people's cabins. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to say here, and this is one of the main misconceptions when you were asking earlier, although people tend to take the date of the Admiralty instruction as the date something happened, when in reality it was happening in common practice, even to the point where ships were being designed with this in mind decades before, right? 1755 to 1790, they're thinking about this. And this is where the real confusion, excuse me, with dates comes in, is that the context is missing. What is codified cannot be taken as a start date. You have to look at the common practices that were happening decades, sometimes even a century before, to really understand what's going on. That's the difference between the 1731 and the 1688 in a nutshell.
Does this link back to your point about Rodney being able to buy Madeira and hoping that he gets away with it? There's a degree of autonomy between about who's controlling the ship, etc., and then it gets codified afterwards. I suppose not, because you're actually building the ships, which is a big
right. They're building the ships. Which is
fine.
No, Rodney speaks to independent command and control, and that they knew that Madeira was much better for the sailors than rum. In the Napoleonic Wars, the army are much more advanced than the navy in this regard. 2 days a week, soldiers are given wine, Madeira wine, instead of rum in the Napoleonic Wars in the Caribbean. That does not happen in the Navy. Navy are in for rum like nobody's business. So we have a photo here. This is the standard shot that we get to see of the Grand Magazine on HMS Victory. What I would like to point out here, when you see rum and you see the grog measures and you see the tots and the copper bands on the barrels, that all comes from gunpowder handling. They're copper sheets along the walls in the magazine, and they're copper on the barrels, copper and rope. And this is where the whole thing with copper and Navy spirits comes from. It's because the copper did not spark, and it was used in the magazines for that very particular reason. They knew it would be good. There were deadlights, which the lantern was in a glass enclosure. But the whole deal with copper and rum comes from copper and gunpowder. Again, you can see it here. This is the filling tub in the ready room. You can see the copper ladles there that they would bag the gunpowder with, and then they have the rope bag there. You can see the dead light behind the screen, so there is no way to spark there. The lantern was in a completely, the magazine was completely sealed off from the light source, and they were called dead lights. Right? But that's if you want to know where the copper comes from, that's the place. I couldn't help myself, and thanks for leaving this in. I took a bottle of Rid-a-Tab on board Victory. I've been meaning to do it. So it's a horrible joke that's unbelievably niche. But essentially, at Battle of Trafalgar, Victory went up against Rid-a-Tab and was victorious. It was a sailor or Marine, French Marine from the tops in Rid-a-Tab that shot Nelson. And Rid-a-Tab had to wait until 2021 to become victorious at the IWSC, winning the Champion Spirit of the Year over everything else. So I had to take a bottle of Rid-a-Tab onto Victory just to let them know that Rid-a-Tab, it took over 2 centuries, but Rid-a-Tab was finally victorious. So, I'm sorry, it's horrible. It's horrible, but thanks for leaving it in.
I was wondering if that was the joke. I did just about get it, but you need a bit of specialist knowledge for that one. Did they get the joke when you took it on board?
Oh no, they had no clue at all. I was very proud of myself and giggling, and they had absolutely no clue. I have a booze stopper made from some wood on Victory, and I put that in every Trafalgar Day, and that's Victory stopping Rid-a-Tab. So that's the flip side, but it's absolutely horrible. We get bored sometimes.
No, that's fine. If you make yourself happy, Geoff, there's no substitute for that.
Well, who says it can't be fun? And that's
exactly
fun. So what we're looking at here now are just a few anecdotes, and this is coming towards the end, of fatal calamities that have befallen ships due to rum. And why did the Navy insist that rum was treated as a volatile substance similar to gunpowder? Well, hopefully a few of these will show you. Here, same Admiral Vernon, Old Grog, the calamity with the ship Tilbury. I think Tilbury was a 44-gun ship, so a warship, drawing off rum in a closed cabin, and the vapors or some liquid got on an open flame and it burnt the Tilbury to the ground. It then got a little bit worse here. The supply store ship caught fire in the roadside Bastille. It caught fire through staving a cask of rum and striking it. And that stores brought out from the UK, which were incredibly valuable at that point in time. And then we get on to what I call the most inaccurate naval painting of all time. So
it's spectacular, though. It is spectacular.
Well, this to me, and I'm maybe crossing the line, but this is the portrait equivalent to some of the more fanciful marketing campaigns out there with gunpowder and Navy proof. So to start off, we'll get into it in the next slide, but the Cesar was a ship of 74 guns, which is a 2-decker, not a 3-decker. And it caught fire and blew up at the Battle of the Saints. There was no other French 3-decker close to it. They were all captured at that time. There were no other ships close to it, because as it started to burn, everybody would have run for the 7 seas. No, the only thing they got right was fire caused by rum, which burnt the ship. And we can see it here. Grieved in misfortune, that Inglefields misfortune after boarding the Cesar of 74 guns in the most heroic manner. A rascal of a Marine corporal went below in the course of the evening in search of rum, and in drawing off a can with a lighted candle in his hand, it caught fire. The noble prize was instantly in a blaze not to be extinguished. It blew up about 9 o'clock, which melancholy accident. The Centaur lost 2 lieutenants, her boatswain, midshipman, and 24 of her best seamen, and a lieutenant and 7 Marines. Her loss in the Battle of the Saints, which was bigger than the Battle of Trafalgar, was 8 killed and 14 wounded. There were over 3 times that many killed because a corporal decided to go downstairs looking for rum, caught the ship on fire. What they did not talk about were the 600 Frenchmen on board that also died in the explosion.
Wow.
That's what rum can do to a ship. And that's why these instructions were there. You know? So there are just a few conclusions here that I'd like people to take away from this. The first one, rum is initially used as a replacement for beer. The volume of the rum ration was consistently reduced. At the end of the Napoleonic Wars, they actually thought about reducing it during the war, and they said, no, we'd have a mutiny. Let's wait till the conflict ends, and then we can look at reducing it again. The term proof was conceptual in nature. There was no such thing as gunpowder proof rum. Now, in the early, what we can say to this is that in the early days, gunpowder was used as a datum only. It was a relatively consistent ignition point, and it was just used as a datum to which other tools were measured. And
Can
then
you
you got
explain datum?
Sure. Basically, that if you have 100, say 100 proof will light gunpowder, below 100 proof won't, above 100 proof will. It was relatively consistent, so you could calibrate your instruments on that, or try to calibrate your instruments on a known point where things will ignite. And you're not talking about washing gunpowder in rum. It's a drop, just lightly moistening it.
And in a safe environment to calibrate your instruments.
Oh yes, this is a way from everybody when you're trying to understand if your instruments are reasonably accurate, and most of them weren't, right? So that's when gunpowder was used as a datum only, right? Rum was recognized to be as dangerous as gunpowder from what we just showed there, and it was treated as such long before the 1790 instructions, and we can see that with the construction of the Bellona. And most importantly here, no one in their right mind tested the quality of rum by soaking gunpowder in it and lighting it on board a ship. That was not done. All right.
So yeah, that's pretty clear.
Yes, it was quite spectacular, and it's this myth that's prevailed, and it drives me a little bit nuts from time to time, to be fair. But that's it. So I hope it's an introduction. I mean, I could build an entire course at the University of Navy Rum, but I wanted to just give you a couple of highlights here and there that. It gives a feel for the perceptions and misconceptions and where maybe some of the more readily available information is inaccurate.
Yeah, no, that's great, because it's spread over from not just rum as well. You know, it is something that bourbon fans say, do you know why it's called proof? And whiskey fans say, do you know why it's called proof? And I suppose there's an element in there that gunpowder could be used to, you know, as a very crude instrument to test the strength of something, but it's extended into people's imagination that it's something that people were doing all the time in some kind of situation. It was the only way to test, and that it was a sensible way to test. I'm not sure if many questions have come in, but Dave, oh, here we go. There's one. Jeremy Watt, thank you. Would it matter on your rank as to what you drink on a ship, or mostly what was available in the area where the ships were operating in? I suppose an element that's been covered there, but
yeah, but if you were a senior non-commissioned officer, you could get your rum neat. Lower ranks got their rum diluted after 1740, and officers paid for their own alcohol. So if they wanted to drink wine, Madeira, brandy, cognac, whatever they wanted, they paid for it. And there was really no ration or any system to tell officers what they could drink or how much they could drink. So they're the three ranks. The lower ranks had to get the ration of what was served. The senior bosun's mates and the senior non-commissioned could drink it neat, and then above that is whatever you paid for.
Right. Thank you. I had a question. Bearing in mind we've got a lot of whiskey fans here as well, and this is extending beyond your presentation a little bit. But in researching whiskey, I've come across a lot of influence in how they talk about spirits over on these shores, and an increasing influence from the planters, especially when it starts to become an economy of distress into the 19th century.
Yes.
There isn't much cross. There's not many links I could find. I have found one, and I wonder if you've come across any, between that capital when the industry is failing over in the Caribbean, coming across to a growing industry in the Scotch whisky industry. And I might have expected it, but it seems quite separate. There's a group of people who've made a lot of money over a long period of time and a diminishing amount of money in the Caribbean. And then there's a rising industry and a kind of professionalization of the Scotch whisky industry. It would seem logical to me that there would be capital coming across and this cross-pollination, but it doesn't seem to be an enormous amount. Have you come across much of that?
No, I haven't. What I can say is that when you say economies in distress, I take you're talking immediately before emancipation and post-emancipation, the 1830s, 1840s.
Exactly that.
Right. So The 1806 and later works talk about a very stable influx of rum into Britain. In 35 years, it changes by about 100,000 gallons. 3/4 of that comes from Jamaica. That is the topic of a talk I have on Thursday, small plug, at the Barbados Museum, which you can see online. But it is the smaller islands use their rum to pay for goods in North America. They use their rum as currency. Jamaica had an excess of rum. So Jamaica supplied about 3/4 of the rum to Britain. The rest of the Caribbean, 25%. And that ratio really didn't change that much. Jamaica was the real juggernaut. And when you had Jamaica Proof, which is the double distilled, low to mid 60s, you're not going to go for the weaker stuff, right? So you do have the post-emancipation, you have beet sugar coming in, but I have not found, and my period ends around 1720, 1725. I've done a little bit of work later on, but you don't really see a cross-pollination at all. The Caribbean is no longer the apple of the British colonial eye. It has gone from a region that has provided vast amount of wealth. In the 1740s, I'll give an aside here, 1740s, same Admiral Vernon, who was a member of Parliament, was speaking to a fellow member of Parliament, and it's recorded. He said, we need to look after the Caribbean because this is 2.5% and 4.5% tax on the goods coming. They said the value of the income the British government makes from the Caribbean pays for most of the interest on the entire British national debt. That's how valuable they were at that time. When you get to the end of the Napoleonic Wars, they're not that valuable anymore. You're looking to India, you're looking to China, and the Caribbean's just left by the wayside. That's how a colonial system works. If you can't provide any reasonable amount of funds to the metropole, you get left by the wayside, right? So
I understand that, and I hear their concerns in some of the parliamentary reports. You know, that they are concerned that they are effectively lobbying, I suppose would be the modern word for it.
Yeah.
But I was just surprised, given that there were, especially because there were a lot of Scottish links of the people that went over to the Caribbean and worked on the plantations and in distillation. I might have thought there would have been that coming back when they did have some money, but it didn't seem to be that way. I found one link with a distillery called Loch-and-Dal on Islay. But apart from that, it's something I'm going to look into. It's definitely something.
It's really interesting, but it hasn't really come across in my research as such.
Yeah, I'm same with me, but I'm not going to give up.
No. It's a worthy rabbit hole to shoot down, you
know. Dave's giving us a wave. Come on in, Dave.
Yeah. I was just wondering, Arthur, that I mean, given the mercantile nature of the whole Caribbean setup, most of the money would have been coming into the UK, it would have been coming into Scotland, and most of the people controlling it wouldn't actually be living in Jamaica, wherever. They would be living in Scotland. So any investment that was coming from rum would actually be coming from the landowners over here. So you probably wouldn't see that direct investment. You know, somebody from Jamaica immediately putting money into Scotland. They'd be coming via the merchants within that. So I would kind of look in that direction, maybe, with Gladstone and people like that, you know, investing in their estates in Scotland. So it would be an indirect investment from rum rather than a direct one. That's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, because it's slightly too early that there are these small companies forming that then become larger companies in Scotland. So yeah, it would be hidden, but the wealth would flow and maybe come back out somewhere else. Yeah, okay, good point.
Slightly different direction. I had one question. Sorry, it was a question passed on from our dear friend Ian Russell, and it's about composition, the blend composition of Navy rum. And I don't know if you want to answer this one, Geoff, but I'll throw it out there. And Ian was wondering is there any record of like neutral or grain spirit from the UK being used in Navy rum?
No.
No. Yeah.
No. Rum was so prevalent in the Caribbean. And again, Barbados was a place that was used quite a lot because of our single distillation. It was lower cost. It was half the cost of double distillation, essentially. And they just wanted the cheapest spirits possible. Back then, it was cheaper to just buy it somewhere rather than to have to ship it. They could fill that space with funnily enough, peas and oats, peas, P-E-A-S-E, and oats and all the other things that you needed. And remember, Barbados didn't sell molasses until very late. All of that molasses went into rum. You're talking in the early 1770s. You're getting close to 2 million gallons a year of rum produced in Barbados to use as currency in North America. About 80% went to North America. And the rum would provide 100% of the OPEX, the operational expenses, the plantation system, and make a profit. And then the sugar was pure profit. So the vast volumes. I don't know how much whiskey was made in Scotland, all of Scotland, in the early 1770s, but I would guess about a quarter of that.
Bear with me.
500,000 gallons ish. This little 166 square miles was producing 4 times as much rum as all the whiskey made in Scotland, because it was a cash crop. So why ship spirits over when it's so readily available in the Caribbean? Now, we were minute compared to Jamaica, who have vast tracts of land.
How as it evolved, how dependent on the Navy was the rum industry? Obviously, post
in Barbados or the Caribbean?
No, Caribbean.
That's a hard one. I can tell you about Barbados till 1820. That's the entire talk on Thursday. Is the final bit on the postdoc. Barbados was very dependent at the end of during the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars. Jamaica still, because Jamaica was north and a whole bunch of different geopolitical factors and military factors, Jamaica maintained their pretty steady sale of rum to Britain throughout the period. And because Jamaica rum was considered superior, they really did corner that market, which I guess continues today.
I can't go quite as far back. Funnily enough, I've been looking at capacities of distilleries across time in Scotland. I know the figure exists, but by 1828, it was nearly 11 million gallons in all of Scotland. But that's post-Excise Act, and we started to see it grow up. By 1828, the number of distilleries had more than doubled in that time. But I'll WhatsApp you the answer to that one. Yeah.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, no, that's really.
I do have the figures somewhere. It's just not in my spreadsheet yet.
Right.
Anything else, Dave? Oh, you're muted, but I'll unmute you.
Sorry. I found it just a fascinating talk, as ever, Geoff. And I think one of the elements is that the way in which we just have this assumption that the Navy always drank rum, and they always drank good rum, and it's part and parcel of that for so long, and it's actually, in the whole scheme of things, a relatively recent thing. Yes. When you think how long the Navy was stationed in the Caribbean. But the one thing that I was intrigued by is the universal adoption of rum by the Navy. Why did it decide to go down the rum route? When
that's a fun one.
Yeah, when Brandy was there, and when Vernon was saying, "You better drinking a gallon of Madeira than a pint of rum." That's an interesting one.
So that That's an entire podcast. Basically, the précis to it is that the Navy was always trying to become more efficient. And the Navy board actually, by the American War, the Navy had taken responsibility for shipping all of the goods to the Army and the Navy. That was then streamlined further into the formation of the Transport Board and the Victualling Board. So the Victualling Board took care of all the contracts gathering the goods, and then the Transport Board took care of all the contracts for sending them out around the world. As Britain became more and more powerful post-Napoleonic Wars, one of those reasons I said earlier about power projection, one of the main things is that they were able to centralize that transportation system to get goods where they needed to be. And 1833, you could argue the new emancipation was coming and they wanted to help out the planters in Jamaica. But by 1844, what they're saying is that, number one, rum is cheap because the fortunes of the Caribbean are depressed, so we can get this rum really cheap. It helps maintain some kind of position in the Caribbean. And we have this really quite streamlined logistical infrastructure in place by the 1840s that we can get rum from Trinidad and Guyana and Jamaica and Barbados and bring it, throw it in vats, get it out to wherever we need to in the world in bulk. And it has to do with the efficiency and the streamlining of the British Transport Board, the Victualling Board, and the projection of imperial power in the mid and late 19th century. That's about as bare bones as I can make it without really diving deep.
Yeah,
I
think that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, logistics rather than taste. You know, again, it's a kind of, it's one of these myths that, well, it's because the sailors love the taste of rum, and it's clearly.
Well, they were trying to get sailors to stop drinking rum, right? You would get money in hand for not taking it at all. You had that option that if you abstained, you would get more money. You know, and it's easier for them to put money on your account than it is to ship rum halfway around the world. So, and they kept just lowering the quantity of rum that sailors got.
Yeah.
You know,
that's it. Yeah, that in itself is interesting as well.
If they could make it taste as terrible as possible, less people would drink it, and they would save money. They didn't care about the taste.
You know? No.
Yeah, I know we do also dig into Gill Lane as well. I think at some stage. So, yeah.
Well, as much as you want to come back and talk to our viewers and talk to us, you'll be more than welcome, Geoff. I found this absolutely fascinating, and to get that historic rigor that.
Thank you. Would you believe this is my first podcast?
Is that right?
Well,
yeah, first one.
You should do it more often and on no other channels than this one.
I'll come up with something interesting, and we can do some sport.
Thanks, Toby. I met Toby in Glasgow, actually. Yeah, lovely chap. Great.
Funny enough, I had a wonderful evening in Glasgow one time. I got married in the Barbados tartan, and the kilt maker was in Glasgow, and I found myself with a couple of hours, and I had a wonderful time at the Old Pot Still. I went in and kind of found a whiskey home away from rum.
If you can't find one there,
yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think it's probably time to wrap up, is it, Dave?
I'm afraid it is, Arthur. But everybody seems to be very happy with it. Hey, Seth.
Hey, what's happening, Seth? How's it going?
Yeah. So wonderful. Very good to have a guest, actually. I'm quite having it.
Yeah, absolutely, it is.
Baiting.
If there's anyone out there who wants to present theories with as much skill as Geoff has tonight, then we'd be delighted to hear from you. Francis.
Francis, who I think should start making rum at Daft Mill. It's a challenge.
He'd give it a go, I'm sure. So we'll bid you farewell, Geoff, and Dave and I will say goodbye to our community. But hang around backstage, and we'll raise a glass to you after the show's over.
That sounds good. I'll be here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Geoff. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you all. That was good fun.
Great. Cheers, Geoff. So, well, that was great, wasn't it, Dave?
That was great. You know, a proper historian. That's how we're meant to do it, apparently.
I know. I've lost my confidence, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do next after I see how a real person does it. But couple of bits of business, I suppose. Well, one is to thank again the people who support this channel, either by watching, but also by financial support on Patreon. It is absolutely essential to us to keep it going, and we are very much going to keep it going. Next week, we put this one out to everyone on YouTube. We need to broaden the net and get more people in, but we also put exclusives out for the people who support us on Patreon. And next week, I think I will have it finished. I already have in the can some footage, which is a nice little companion piece to this episode, where I have interviewed John Myers, who was in command of submarines during the Cold War, and wonderful chap, and actually an old family friend. And the subject is, what did they drink on nuclear submarines? They did drink on nuclear submarines. It's a unique and interesting environment, and how that was controlled and just what they drank, to me, seemed like a fun and fascinating little topic. So a little different to what we do, a bit more that, I don't know, the cultural history or just drinking in unusual environments. But I think it kind of fits, and it fits nicely with this episode, which we knew was coming up. So I need to do a bit of editing on that, and that'll be going out to Patreon supporters in the next week or so. Just need to edit it down. Apart from that, anything else, Dave? We've got a few things that we're tinkering around with and researching, and that
Things kind of rumbling away. It was good. We actually met up face to face last week, so there was a good few ideas kicking about. So yeah, I'm quite excited about one little rabbit hole, or a couple of rabbit holes are going down. So yeah, watch the space.
Yeah, we've got a big long list of topics that we wanted to get onto. It's time to go back to that list, and I dare say we'll sneak something in before Christmas.
I dare say we will. What does Santa drink? I don't know. He must be really pissed if he keeps getting given whiskey and sherry at every house. Yeah,
you got whiskey in my house, but so Dave, I do hope your cold gets better.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I'll be fine.
Great. And you inquire at the end. Well, anyway, cheers to you all. Cheers to you, Dave.
Pleasure.
Good night.